Hello and welcome to the Sociology Staffroom. I'm very excited because although we've got Sarah Butler, and I'm going to give the official introduction for Sarah, she actually, at the top of that list, I want to put good friend and I suppose mentor really rather than coach. I've talked with Sarah for a long, well, I say talked with Sarah when I first started teaching, didn't I, Sarah? A long, long time ago. But obviously we haven't talked for many years, but we still keep in contact over teaching and learning. So I'm going to do the official bit first. This is Sarah Butler, who is the head of sociology and psychology at a selective school within the South East. Obviously experienced sociology teacher, and most importantly, a tech geek, but a good friend. So thank you for your time this evening.
It's lovely to be here. I was going to describe our relationship as fellow sociology geeks.
Yes, definitely. I mean, I think when we first started, I think we were just, or maybe I was the geek and you were the cool one, and then over time, you got more into sociology. We've done similar sort of courses and studies, and I know that you're also studying towards a PhD at the moment. So, but we're here to talk about tech in sociology and how we can use EdTech. And I know that I've personally asked you questions about that, particularly during lockdown. I was like, help me, I've never taught like this before. And actually, for lots of us, isn't maybe I'm assuming maybe it's just me, isn't part of our toolkit as such. So really sort of want to go straight into it. What do we mean by EdTech? What does that even mean for someone that may not, have used it as such?
I think firstly, you're absolutely right. For so many people, the lockdown and teaching online for that extended period of time really was the kind of push that so many people needed to dip their toe in the EdTech waters. And some people, I think, remember it as a distant memory, and some people then brought that back into the classroom with them. And I think EdTech, educational technology, it's become a bit of a, hashtag EdTech. I think it's simply the resources we use digitally to enhance teaching and learning. And I think that can have it can have like a negative kind of persona sometimes, because people think of it as very gimmicky. And I think the thing we have to remember about it is this is part of our pedagogical toolkit. It's not something we bolt on. It's not something we use because we think we have to. And it's not something we use to make the lessons fun. I think it's something that we do to enhance. So it's all based on what's your learning objective? How are you going to use the EdTech to enhance that? And a lot of it is about the insight that it gives us into what the students are doing.
And I think that's the bit important, like you've just said, like what enhances the students, what does it, not as a bolt-on, it's something that enhances their learning and encourages a sort of stretch and challenge, I suppose. And like you mentioned there, a lot of us were pushed into it. I don't think I embraced it necessarily with open arms. I was a really bit scared, but I spent a lot of time teaching myself with the help of you, different sort of tools. But I want to be honest, full disclosure, I haven't really used it again since. I've gone back to sort of my traditional toolkit, and I feel like scared to tell you that because I sort of really embrace. But do you know what? I know why. I think that it triggers something for me. I think it's not the EdTech. I think it's when I used it. So really from a psychology perspective, when I think of EdTech, I think of lockdown, and I think of COVID, and I think of all of those things. And I've maybe if I got to know and play around with it more outside the realms of COVID, it's a bit like I don't know, certain other triggers, but I won't go into it because it's like a therapy session about COVID. So, I mean, first of all, how should it not be used? Because you said, like, obviously it could be a bit of a bolt-on. Is that just as far as that? It shouldn't be used as a bolt-on? Or how else could it be used not the best way possible?
I think it's got to be something that contributes to achieving your learning intention. If it doesn't contribute to that, you've got to ask yourself what the reason is that you're doing it. That doesn't mean something can't be fun and engaging and contribute to the learning intention. But there's got to be that kind of reflective question, hasn't there? You know, why am I going to use this? Am I doing a quiz at the beginning of the lesson because the students love Kahoot and the music gets them really excited? Full disclosure, I hate Kahoot. I just need to say that quite early on. I hate Kahoot. I hate mini whiteboards. They're two things drive me nuts. But I think there are lots of alternatives to them that do the same thing. So I think if you're doing a quiz at the beginning of the lesson and you realise that using an online tool is going to give you a better insight into your student formative position or your formative insight that you can gain, then, you know, doing it through their phones and getting a percentage on the screen of who got which answer right or wrong is often way quicker than using mini whiteboards or asking them to put their hands up. If it gives you a bigger sample in terms of the learning that's taken place and where the learning gaps are, then it's really useful. But if you're doing it superficially, and of course we're plugging in the information to these quizzes, or, you know, there's so many different things we can use, whether you're writing collaborative paragraphs, students are working together collaboratively in the same room or from home or online, or in a computer room or on their phones in the classroom, or if you've got Chromebooks in the classroom. You know, so many schools are set up in so many different ways in terms of devices. But if you've plugged in an overly easy multiple choice as your lesson starter, it's not going to be the most effective memory retrieval. But if you've plugged in a multiple choice that acts as a hinge question or a set of hinge questions, and you know your students are going to take away a list of learning gaps and some really clear actionable feedback from that activity, then the online part is simply the way we deliver the pedagogy, not the pedagogy itself. Does that make sense? Have I gone too geeky?
No, I think, like, let me paraphrase. So basically, it's a tool, basically,
Yeah.
and it's not something that replaces pedagogy. It's something that enhances it. Is that, as I'm understanding, that it's something that is something that is embedded within a lesson, but it's not all and everything. So, like you said, you might have some multiple questions that are on a tool as such, but then you might add on some hinge questions, and it might be more of an effective way. I'm not suggesting that people who use whiteboards, it's just your personal choice, you don't like, where it's like a little brackets there for people that do like to use them. Is that maybe more an effective tool because, like you said, there's a greater sample of students could participate, and then it's more instant as well, so you could see what's going on in regards to feedback. So then, tell me, what tools are you using then, Sarah? Like I'm thinking of, when, like you said, Kahoot is, and again, for those people who like Kahoot, that's them, and obviously, you know, people again are different, and there's some other brands out there. But what do you use? I know that what I used during lockdown, I actually thought it was quite useful. But what are you using at the moment?
So at the moment, so this afternoon I had 60 students in the main hall and we use Slido. And Slido is exactly the same as Kahoot. It just doesn't have the music and it doesn't have the fun. So I'm not making myself out sound a really boring teacher here, but it simply gives you the percentage of the students that chose each answer, and then you reveal which was the correct answer. And I think because it takes away the kind of energizing aspect of Kahoot, but you've got all of the power of the tool that it is, I absolutely love using it. So for me, that tells me, it surprises me all the time. You know, I'll think, oh, this is an easy question, everyone's going to get this right. And then I look and the class are split between two different studies. And I genuinely, then that informs my planning. It informs what we do next in the lesson. It informs whether we can move on. Because of so much that it tells me. And I think if you're sampling one or two students in the class, you're not going to get that insight. Students so often don't want to speak out about the fact they might not understand something. But when they're pushed into having to choose an option on their phone, and we can talk about the boundaries around having phones in the classroom, and I'm talking about from a sixth form perspective, which obviously, you know, there are many schools where you can't ask your year nines to get their phones out. But I think that's the formative insight for me is everything, basically. That's the, you know, if it tells me something that I wasn't otherwise going to find out. And I've got year 13 classes with 30 students in. Now, mini whiteboards, even if I did like them, and I like the electronic version of them, I like what they do, but I can't look at 30 mini whiteboards in the time that I can look at the breakdown on the screen. So for me, it's incredibly efficient to have something like Slido. But then if we're talking about things like quizzes, I really like WordWall as well. WordWall is you can create not just the online quiz, but you can create the printable version of it. So you've got your online quiz, but the students might do it on paper, or they might do it on their phone, and they can go back and practice it time and time again. And the thing I like about WordWall is you can put a QR code on the screen at the beginning of the lesson. And that's your kind of do now. So the students come in, that's it. They grab their phone, they scan the QR code. There's something kind of feels really efficient about that. But they've also got that QR code on the slides for future revision, you know, when they want to revise those topics. But I don't think it's all about memory retrieval and quizzes. It's about writing collaboratively. There's something amazing about seeing students from four corners of the classroom working on the same paragraph. And you can do that through Google Slides, you can do that through Google Docs, you can do that through Microsoft, although it updates slightly slower. So the students have to refresh more. But there's something amazing about, you know, writing a paragraph and then someone else in the room highlighting the analysis or highlighting the evaluation or highlighting the key studies or the sociological terminology. And the power that it has for peer feedback is amazing, I think. So I think like we kind of have to remember that sometimes we're talking about exam skills and sometimes we're talking about AO1 and kind of application. So it's, and again, it comes back to what's the learning intention and does the technology enhance it?
Or hinder it potentially as well.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely, yeah.
Especially like it takes it off, like you said, if it's more entertaining rather than sort of the value-added element. So it was an interesting bit. You said it was a lot for me to take on, like because obviously I'm sort of sitting here feeling a bit guilty that I haven't done this. And you know, even like I was thinking, you know, sort of like you said, the sort of Google Docs, and I think it's great that everyone can be working on something at one time. I know that, say for example, I did actually do a bit of that. So I got my students to do a project, a piece of research. And they obviously created Google Forms as well. So they were doing sort of using tech there. And they were working in projects. And they were all working on a project together, a couple of them. And they could build Google Docs at the same time and sort of work on that, which I think is amazing. Like, you know, like you said, seeing them sort of collaborate next to each other, but all contributed. I know we're doing an assembly next week, volunteered, got students opting in for International Women's Day to do with the assembly, which should make sense that sociology students are doing that. But again, we're creating that through a document like that. But I'm interested because I have seen Slido, I have seen it. Can that create a QR code from that? Can you do that as well?
I think, yeah, so Slido's live, so you create the QR code and everyone joins. Whereas things like WordWall are more kind of static activities and each student joins individually. So with WordWall, you'd get your own result, but with Slido, you're compared against others. And I don't think the element of competition needs to be in every single lesson. I think quite often that kind of ipsative assessment of students just basing their achievement on their previous achievement and their individual progress journey. I think the other thing that's worth mentioning is it's not always just about student collaboration. These tools are fantastic for teacher collaboration. So we use Microsoft Forms, and you can use Google Forms as well. We set 50 mark, once a term, we do a knowledge test in class, and we do a 50 mark test, and we collaborate together as teachers, and we have a lot of discussion while we're collaborating on that same form. Actually, these questions are too easy. Let's raise the level of challenge. I didn't use that study. You use that study. We can't really test them on that. What study have we used? You know, have we all used? And that kind of, or how can we use this multiple choice that's worth 50 marks to test their evaluation skills as well as their AO1 skills? So it really gets teachers working together. And we've, you know, if you're working across two sites or you're working within an academy trust, it allows that you don't have to be on the same campus, you don't have to be in the same classroom, and you're able to have that level of collaboration. I think for me, that's a really nice, to create materials that have a real impact on the students, to be able to do that together. It's lovely.
Gosh, there's so much scope, isn't there? Like to do these things. I'm like, oh, what can I do? What can I do? Like I think if I was to take like baby steps, so like say if you're like a technophobe or someone that's been sort of traumatized because of COVID and they're sort of obviously I use Pear Deck, as you know, that's what I use, which again, I just got the free version of it because I wasn't willing to pay any money for it out of my own pocket. And obviously, you know, it's a long time ago. What would you start off with? What's a good intro for someone that's sort of, I don't know, more old school. Actually, do you know what I did the other day? That just sounds how old school I am. I actually bought some flip chart paper to do some collaborative essay writing, just go back old school, you know. I did a bit of reflection, and I was like, do you know what things did I used to do that work and I wanted something that was low stakes, you know, like where there isn't, you know, when you just got loads of like just mind mapping an essay structure. So I'm talking about tech, and I realised I've just bought some flip chart paper and gone a bit old school there. But if I was someone that was as technophobe as me, what would be a good starting point? What resource do you think?
And I will answer that question, but I think honestly, we have to realise that we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We might use tech in our lessons, but flip chart paper and post-it notes and coloured card and laminated and matching activities. I don't think we will, you know, one day we might be paperless, but I hope that time doesn't come while I'm still teaching, because I think having tangible things in the classroom is so important. And we don't want our young people looking at screens all the time. So having those activities and then kind of punctuating them with a bit of tech as well, I think is really the way forward. And I think if you were someone who really was, I think, first of all, you've got to think, why do I want to do this? And if you don't have a good sort of pedagogically sound reason for doing it, then just don't do it, because, you know, there's no pressure. We can teach outstanding lessons, we can take students on amazing journeys without this. But if you really wanted to kind of dip your toe and not feel overwhelmed, I think you mentioned Pear Deck. I think Pear Deck is amazing for unlocking prior knowledge, because with Pear Deck you can attach it to your PowerPoint or your Google Slides, and you can say to the students, right, here's a question, everybody just type their answers on the screen. And it's low stakes because it doesn't have the student's name come up, so it's all anonymous. Obviously, you've got to have really good behaviour expectations and boundaries in place, especially depending on the age of the students. So something like that, I think you just kind of say, right, do you know what, in this one lesson, I'm going to use one Pear Deck slide to gather that information, and then the phones go away, or the laptops or the Chromebooks, whatever you're using, go away for the rest of the lesson, and we carry on. And I think the biggest tip, and I've done this so many times and colleagues have done it as well, is if you're going to use that with students, do it with your department first. Do it in a department meeting. Say, can I have 10 minutes of a department meeting to try this out? Get them on their phones, you know, have a go so that you feel like you're not going in cold. And I think on that note as well, tell the students, I've never tried this before. I'm going to give it a go, and I'll be really interested to see what you think after we've done it. And have that frank, like, it's quite metacognitive for the students, isn't it? But it's also that learner voice. You know, have that frank conversation. Did this add to your learning or not? Should we do it again? How might it be better? How often would you like to do this? And I think that's, you know, they come on that journey with you. And I think that's a really nice, there will be things that you try that you never use again. You know, some people
so true. So I feel like I'm listening and I'm like, oh my god, I think because, as you know, I obviously know you well as well, but I'm sort of reflecting. I feel like I'm sort of taking it in and reflecting and thinking it's just so true. Like, if you haven't got the reason to do it and you don't know your why, then maybe it's not for you. But if you want to dip your toes, using your words, then fine. It's about choosing that right group, isn't it? That you don't do it with your sort of group you haven't created those bonds with necessarily, and it's a bit of a risk. You go with a trusted group, start it maybe with your department first, which sort of makes sense. And actually probably use more tech. As you're talking, I'm thinking, well, I don't use much tech, but then I was thinking, actually, I'm quite chilled about what next topic we do for year 13 options topic. So I've just sent the students out what they call Survey Monkey. What's that called? This internet. I mean, sorry, this Survey Monkey. I sent them out a Survey Monkey and got them to reply to that. And actually, once a half term, I do a student voice via that to find out what units they feel most comfortable with, which ones they feel like sort of a rag rate activity. I get them to sort of highlight best techniques for revision, how many hours they're revising, honestly, all that sort of stuff, so that I can then prep the next unit and then obviously prep revision. So I suppose we do use bits and pieces, but remind myself about Pear Deck. You talked a bit about sort of making sure you've got those boundaries in place, particularly with the sort of mobile phone element. Obviously, top tips regarding, I mean, obviously, you don't want us to tell us how to suck eggs, but obviously, you know, getting the students to put the phones away. Whoever came up with that saying, by the way, suck eggs? I don't even know.
I don't know where it comes from, honestly.
Who would want to suck an egg? I don't know.
No doubt there would be something sociological in the reason behind that, but some sociolinguistics.
I don't want to think about it too much, but yes.
I do think you have to be really aware of your context. So I've worked in several different schools and colleges, and they've all had different approaches and different policies based on the use of devices. And in some schools, it's not okay to be using your personal device, like your phone. In some schools, students have their phones locked away in their lockers all day, so it's not something that you can go rogue. We don't want to be Venkatesh here, do we? And just kind of go ahead with something that doesn't fit the school culture or doesn't fit the school boundaries. But I think if and you've kind of checked that it's something that's okay within your school, I think then the next step, so if it's a supported experiment, I suppose, isn't it, if you're doing it for the first time, the next step is then, do the students understand those boundaries? So I'm not saying everyone should do this, but I quite like the students to have if they're using their phone for something, I like them to have the phone flat on the table. Now, that's partly not really a massive concern of mine, actually. My students are lovely, but I don't really want their camera to be able to be used. So if the phone's flat on the table, we've got no worries about videoing or photographing people. Not that I genuinely think that's an issue with my students, but I think it's something to think about. But the other reason I want their phone flat on the table when they're doing these activities is I don't want them to be on their phone and not have a pen and paper available, because everything they're doing on their phone, it's revealing learning gaps. They're getting things wrong. Hopefully they're getting things wrong. We love a classroom full of wrong answers, don't we? So they're getting these things wrong. If they're not jotting that down, are they going to revisit those things over and over again? And if they're not revisiting, why are we doing that retrieval? I mean, this is all about cognitive science, isn't it? So if we're not doing that retrieval in a way that they go, right, this hasn't embedded in my long-term memory yet, I need to. So we have a learning gaps card on the back of their booklet, and they've got 3 columns. So you write down the thing that you got wrong in the quiz on your phone. You have to revisit that in your study periods 3 times, and you've got to tick it off. And you've got to RAG rate it as well. Did I remember it easily, or was it hard, or could I not remember it that time? And I think that's the boundary for me, I suppose. Is it a boundary? It's not a behavior boundary, but it's a kind of learning boundary of, you are never going to sit there. No one's going to lean back in their chair with both hands on their phone and just do a quiz, because what do we do with the wrong answers from that? So for me, that's the kind of boundary I think really is. And then also it's, right, we're done with the phones. They're going away now.
Yeah, making that
clear. Because we all get distracted by notifications and things, don't we? So we just need to go, right, that served its purpose, now it's going away.
Yeah, definitely.
And if you're in a school where...
We're just thinking about also being mindful of your students, which is obvious, but obviously if your school hasn't got Wi-Fi, those students might not have the data as well, so that might not be an option if it's eating into the data, because what you don't want to do is create a divisive situation where students haven't got access to phones or they haven't got the data as well. So it's not just about the pedagogy as well, it's also sort of the wellbeing element to that for those students.
And I think that's the other thing, is some schools have got device schemes, haven't they? So some schools have got one-to-one iPads, some schools have got class sets of Chromebooks that you can get out in the lesson, and then some schools you've got students who maybe don't have a mobile phone. We take that for granted quite often, don't we? And yes, students can pair up. I think you really need to be aware of your context before you expect any use of technology. And obviously, I think the best situation is when the school does have devices, because there's that parity. Everyone's got access to the same resources.
Yeah, definitely. I just so much. I'm just like, I feel for the first time, maybe not completely quiet, but just thinking about that, because I'm sort of thinking of trying out. I'm being a bit do my own action research, a couple of things, and that might be something else I take on board, because being a reflective practitioner is always helpful, isn't it? On our last thing, I know you've talked about something that we could use if we want to dip our toe in, but what is your favourite sort of tool, as you personal, like as in you, Sarah Butler, what is your favourite EdTech tool? If you're on a desert island, per se, you was going to take a ticket.
That's a really tough question, because I think it is about that varied diet. I think we do have go-to favourites that there's one tool you can use in WordWall where you simply, on their phones, the students drag and drop to match up key terms with definitions. So it's so easy to do those quick recall, matching up the theorists with the theories, or matching up the studies with the concepts. And I really like those because I think they just start the lesson on this really interactive element. But then I think, and so I've completely changed your question because this isn't really a favourite, but I think there's so much further we could go with this. Voice marking, students getting a voice notes to listen to from their essay.
I used to do that all that time during lockdown. I did that loads because I thought, obviously we missed that sort of face-to-face element. It was something you could do in the classroom. I used to drop voice notes like there was no tomorrow. Hi.
Yeah, but does it reduce teachers' workload? Does it reduce teachers' workload?
Massively.
Does it reduce the crampy hand of marking? There's so many ways we could go with technology. The way and what's the chat GPT? Is that the one?
Oh yeah, that's
the AI.
Favorite. Yeah.
These tools that students have available to them. So it's not just actually about what we're doing in the classroom, is it? It's about what students are able to use outside of the classroom as well. And we've got these tools available that are changing every single year that we teach students. It's a bit like the census data with sociology. Like every year I teach, there's a different set of data to refer to, which is amazing. It's the same with technology. We've got different options available. So I think the main thing is kind of staying aware, and I think being involved in online groups for teachers who want to share those tips. I've been to the BET show a few times and got introduced to, the BET show happens in East London. So if you teach near there, you've got a real advantage. You can pop over in your lunch break. But you get introduced to so many things there. I worked somewhere where we had Google trainers who would come in and would help us do the Google qualifications and learn more. So I think as well as like having those favorites is keeping up to date with what else is happening and sharing everything that you find. When you find something, don't keep it to yourself. There's bound to be a group of people in your school who would love to hear about it.
Oh, definitely. And I'm sure you'll find that network.
Yeah, during lockdown, we were pinging each other. We were using Microsoft Teams, pinging each other all the time. Have you tried this? Have you tried this? Have you used this? Look how this works. And I think, obviously EdTech's taken a slight backseat now that we're not relying on it all day, every day from our home offices. But I think there's still an aspect of you find your people that want to geek out with you about EdTech, and it's just a really nice way to showcase and share and collaborate.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like you said, it's about staying fresh and staying abreast of what's going on and the changes. And I think, what you just said as well is if it's not within an online community, I'm sure there's someone within your school that would necessarily feel the same in that and finding that out. So there's so much, honestly, my brain's like, I'm gonna try. I think out of all of them, because I have tried Pear Deck out, I'm going to try that Slido. I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to commit myself to that. So when I see you next,
can I suggest one other thing that I think is lovely, actually? When you said, what's my favourite? This is my current favourite, but I haven't used it long enough to know if it's a gimmick. Canva is another program you can use to do your lesson slides. And when you present a slide deck in Canva, they're a keyboard shortcut. So if you press M, it does a mic drop. And if you press C, it does confetti, like a little celebration on the screen. And there's a button that does bubbles. And there's a button that puts an emoji up that says, shh. So you've got all these kind of classroom tools that maybe just add that kind of aspect of engagement. Maybe you use them to kind of bring your questioning to life or to celebrate student responses. And I think at the moment, that's kind of one of my favourite things because it's not many people know about it. So the students are like, oh, wow, how did that happen? That's amazing. And it's just, it's not a learning tool, really. It's more of an engagement tool. But I just think there's something really nice. And I think if you were just wanting to try something, but not having to think about plugging in questions and, designing materials, then something like that is just that little bit of interaction.
Oh, there's so much, isn't there? And I suppose a lot of schools as well, just thinking as you're talking, I feel like full on mind mapping session with you, and I'm conscious of time, but I was also thinking as well, like a lot of schools will use Google Classroom. So again, it's a way of connecting with students there. So I'm sure on different levels we're doing those things. And like you said, it's enhancing learning, it's about engaging the students. And if it's not doing those things, then maybe it might be not the thing that we should be using at that time. I know that we've got someone talking about ChatGTP in a couple of weeks or months' time, actually. I'd love to talk about that more. I know I've got someone talking about that, but I'm sure I'll talk about that with you outside. And I know there's I know there's other practitioners that have got thoughts around that and how we can use it. But thank you for your time, Sarah. And it's always great to speak to you, because I don't know, I feel like it's maybe a bit more of a one-way relationship with me and you, that I feel like I gain loads from you, and I'm like, oh, what's Sarah gained from me?
Definitely not. No way.
Thank you for your time, and have a lovely evening, and look after yourself, and thank you for getting me to think. So
thank you.
All right, take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.